Rain fell over the Oregon coast in long silver sheets the night Elias Holloway returned to Blackwater County with his wife and 2 children. The storm swallowed the roads behind their carriage and buried the pine forests beneath darkness so thick it seemed alive. Travelers avoided the region after sunset because strange things had always been whispered about the hills surrounding Blackwater Lake. Hunters spoke of pale figures standing among the trees. Fishermen claimed they heard voices under the water after midnight. Entire families had disappeared there long before railroads reached the Pacific Northwest. But Elias Holloway feared poverty more than old legends. The Holloway family had once possessed wealth in Boston, though years of gambling, failed shipping ventures, and illness destroyed nearly everything they owned. Elias believed Oregon represented salvation. The government had granted him legal rights to a stretch of isolated timberland after a distant relative died without heirs. Hidden deep in the wilderness stood the relative's abandoned estate, a sprawling Victorian manor known as Holloway House. Locals called it Grimhollow. The carriage wheels groaned over muddy earth as Elias adjusted the lantern hanging beside him. His wife, Margaret Holloway, stared silently through the rain-streaked window. She was pale from the long journey west and exhausted from caring for their children, 17-year-old Clara and 10-year-old Samuel. Samuel sat curled beneath a wool blanket. "Are we close?" he asked. Elias nodded without looking back. "We'll be home soon." Margaret hated the way he used the word home. Nothing about the journey felt right from the moment they crossed into Blackwater County. The people in town stared too long. Storekeepers refused to speak after hearing their surname. At the inn where they spent the previous night, the old owner crossed himself upon learning they intended to live at Holloway House. "Best leave before the fog settles," the innkeeper whispered. "The hills remember that family." Elias dismissed him as a superstitious fool. The carriage eventually emerged from dense forest onto a narrow ridge overlooking the lake. Lightning flashed across the sky. Margaret gasped. Holloway House stood on a cliff above the black water like a corpse refusing burial. The mansion stretched 3 stories high beneath steep roofs and towering chimneys. Dead ivy strangled its walls. Broken windows stared outward like empty eyes. One wing of the estate leaned slightly as though sinking into the earth. Samuel whispered, "It looks haunted." Elias forced a laugh. "It's old, that's all." But even he felt uneasy. A rusted iron gate blocked the road. The words Holloway Estate were barely visible beneath decades of corrosion. Elias climbed down from the carriage and pushed the gate open with a shriek of metal. As they approached the manor, Clara noticed something strange. There were no animal sounds. No owls. No insects. No frogs near the lake. Only the rain. The front doors opened with difficulty. A cloud of dust drifted into the lantern light as the family stepped inside. The entrance hall was enormous. Portraits lined the walls from floor to ceiling. Holloway ancestors stared down with stern expressions and hollow eyes. The air smelled of mildew and rotting wood. Margaret held Samuel close. "We shouldn't stay here tonight." "We have no choice," Elias replied. Thunder rolled overhead. At the far end of the hall stood a grandfather clock. It began ticking the moment they entered. Clara froze. "Father, was it moving before?" Elias looked toward the clock. The pendulum swung steadily. Tick, tick, tick. "I suppose the mechanism still works." But deep inside himself, he knew the clock had been silent moments earlier. They spent the evening lighting oil lamps and exploring only the lower floor. Most rooms were buried beneath sheets and dust. Yet despite decades of abandonment, certain things appeared strangely untouched. A dining table remained perfectly arranged with silver utensils. Fresh firewood rested beside several fireplaces. One candle in the library had melted recently. Margaret noticed muddy footprints near the staircase. "Someone's been living here," she whispered. Elias examined the tracks. They were barefoot. Very small. Like a child's. He told himself squatters occasionally wandered into abandoned properties. Still, he locked every door before the family retired for the night. Clara and Samuel shared a bedroom overlooking the lake. Their mother slept poorly beside Elias in the master chamber. Wind moaned through the halls like distant crying. At some hour after midnight, Clara awoke. She heard footsteps. Soft, slow, moving outside their bedroom door. She sat upright in bed. The footsteps stopped. Samuel remained asleep. Clara waited in silence, staring at the darkness beneath the door. Then she saw it. A shadow moved across the hallway. Not the shadow of a grown man. The shadow of a little girl. Clara's throat tightened. The figure paused outside the room. A child's voice whispered through the wood. "Don't let him find the cellar." Clara screamed. Elias burst into the room holding a lantern and revolver. "What happened?" There was someone outside. They searched the hallway thoroughly. No one was there. But near the staircase they found wet footprints leading downward into darkness. Margaret begged Elias to leave the estate immediately. He refused. We're exhausted and frightened, he snapped. That's all this is. The next morning the storm cleared, revealing the bleak landscape surrounding Holloway House. The lake spread beneath gray skies like an endless grave. Pine forests climbed the hills in every direction. A narrow trail led toward town several miles away. Elias spent the day inspecting the property while Margaret unpacked supplies. Clara remained uneasy after the previous night. Samuel avoided leaving her side. During his inspection, Elias discovered a locked room on the second floor. Unlike the other doors, this one was reinforced with iron bands. A symbol had been carved into the wood. 3 circles joined together. He searched the house until he found a brass key hidden inside a desk drawer. The room beyond contained dozens of journals stacked upon shelves. Candles, religious symbols, animal bones hanging from the ceiling, and a large family tree painted directly onto the wall. Every Holloway name had been carefully written in black ink. Some names were crossed out. Others had dates beside them. Several names were scratched away violently, as if someone tried to erase their existence. At the center of the tree appeared one phrase. He waits beneath. Elias felt a coldness crawl through him. He opened the nearest journal. The handwriting belonged to a man named Gideon Holloway. October 14, 1849. The lake grows restless again. Father says the offering must be made before winter. Abigail hears voices under the floorboards every night. Mother refuses to enter the cellar after dusk. We are being watched. Elias frowned. The next entry was worse. November 2nd. The child was taken below. She cried for hours. Father says her suffering protects the bloodline. God forgive us. Elias slammed the journal shut. A floorboard creaked behind him. He turned sharply. The room was empty, yet he could have sworn someone stood there moments earlier. That evening Clara wandered outside alone while the sun disappeared behind thick clouds. She followed the cliff path toward the lake despite her mother's warnings. Something drew her there. The water barely moved. Mist drifted above its surface. As Clara approached the shore, she noticed dozens of crude wooden crosses planted in the mud. None bore names, only dates. 1847, 1848, 1849, 1850, 1851. Every cross marked the grave of a child. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. Cold wind moved across the lake, carrying a smell like wet earth and something rotten beneath it. She stepped closer to the nearest cross. The wood looked ancient, splintered by rain and time. Then she noticed tiny handprints pressed into the mud around them. Fresh handprints. A branch cracked somewhere behind her. Clara turned sharply. At first she saw nothing except mist drifting through the trees. Then a figure slowly emerged from the fog. A little girl. She couldn't have been older than 8. Her white dress hung in tatters, soaked black near the bottom. Long wet hair covered most of her face. Water dripped steadily from her fingers onto the ground. Clara's heart pounded violently. The child lifted her head. Her skin was pale gray. And her eyes were completely black. You shouldn't be here, the girl whispered. Clara stumbled backward. Who are you? The girl ignored the question. He heard your father. The lake behind her rippled strangely. Not like normal water. Something moved beneath the surface. Slow. Massive. Clara felt frozen in place. My father, she whispered. The girl nodded slowly. He opened the room. A low sound suddenly echoed beneath the water. Like a deep groan. The mist thickened around the shoreline. Then Clara heard another voice. Not the girl's. A man's voice. Soft. Distant. Calling her name from somewhere under the lake. Clara. She backed away immediately. The little girl's expression changed into terror. Run. The water exploded. A pale arm burst from the lake surface for a split second before vanishing again. Clara screamed and ran toward the woods as fast as she could. Behind her she heard splashing. Heavy footsteps. And children laughing. She didn't stop running until Holloway House appeared through the trees. The mansion looked darker now. As though night had swallowed it whole. Clara burst through the front doors gasping for breath. Margaret rushed toward her. What happened? There's something in the lake, Clara cried. There's a girl out there. Elias appeared from the hallway carrying one of the journals. His face looked pale and disturbed. You saw someone? Yes. But before Clara could continue, a loud crash echoed upstairs. Everyone froze. Another crash followed. Then dragging sounds. Elias slowly looked toward the ceiling. Stay here, he whispered. Margaret grabbed his arm. Don't go alone. But Elias pulled away and climbed the staircase carrying a lantern. The sounds continued overhead. Furniture scraping across wood. Footsteps moving inside the locked room. Clara noticed something strange then. Samuel was staring upward silently. Smiling. Samuel, she whispered. The boy spoke without taking his eyes off the ceiling. He's awake now. Margaret tightened her grip on him. What does that mean? Samuel blinked slowly. The man under the house. A terrible scream suddenly erupted upstairs. Elias. Margaret grabbed the lantern and rushed toward the staircase while Clara followed close behind. They found Elias standing outside the journal room trembling violently. The door stood open. Candles inside the room burned brightly despite nobody lighting them. The family tree painted across the wall had changed. New words were written beneath the black ink. Welcome home. Elias stepped backward slowly. There was someone in there, he whispered. Margaret looked around nervously. The room was empty, yet the air smelled damp, like lake water. Clara noticed muddy footprints circling the walls. Tiny barefoot prints. Dozens of them. Then one of the journals suddenly fell from the shelf by itself. It landed open at a specific page. Elias stared down at the writing. His face lost all color. Margaret grabbed the book. What is it? The journal entry was dated December 3, 1850. Tonight the drowned father demanded another offering. Nathaniel tried refusing him. By morning we found his wife hanging from the staircase with water pouring from her mouth. The children say they can hear scratching beneath the cellar door again. Margaret slammed the journal shut. We're leaving now. This time Elias didn't argue. The family hurried downstairs gathering supplies while thunder rolled outside once more. Rain began hammering against the windows. Clara helped Margaret load blankets into the carriage. Samuel remained strangely calm, almost happy. As Elias opened the front doors, freezing wind swept through the entrance hall. Then the grandfather clock began ringing. Once, twice, 3 times. The sound continued far beyond midnight. 7, 8, 9. Margaret covered her ears. It won't stop. 13. The final bell echoed through the mansion like a funeral toll. Then silence. Every lamp inside the house extinguished simultaneously. Darkness swallowed them whole. Something moved above the staircase. Clara heard wet footsteps descending slowly from the upper floor. Step, step, step. Margaret lit the lantern again with shaking hands. The light revealed a figure standing near the stairs. A woman, tall, dressed in black funeral clothing from another century. Water streamed from her empty eye sockets. Samuel smiled wider. She found us. The woman's mouth opened unnaturally wide. And dozens of children's voices emerged from inside her throat at once. He waits beneath. Suddenly every door in the mansion slammed shut. The walls trembled violently. And somewhere below the house, deep beneath stone and earth, something enormous began to breathe. The breathing grew louder, slow, ancient. The entire mansion seemed to pulse with it. Dust drifted from the ceiling as the floorboards trembled beneath their feet. Margaret clutched Clara's arm. We have to get out. Elias rushed toward the front doors and pulled desperately at the handles. They wouldn't move. It felt as though something on the other side held them shut. Behind them, the drowned woman tilted her head unnaturally. Black water poured from her mouth onto the staircase. Samuel stepped toward her. Samuel, Margaret screamed, but the boy ignored her. His eyes looked distant now, cloudy and strange. The woman slowly pointed toward the basement door. Then she vanished. Not disappeared. Vanished like smoke swallowed by darkness. For several seconds nobody moved. Then came the scratching. Directly beneath the floor. Tiny fingernails scraping wood. Clara nearly cried when she heard children whispering underneath them. So cold. Help us. He hurts. Margaret fell to her knees covering her ears. Elias stared toward the basement hallway as if hypnotized. He wants us down there, he whispered. No, Margaret snapped. We are not going anywhere near that cellar. But Samuel suddenly began walking. Slowly. Toward the basement door. Clara grabbed him. You can't go down there. Samuel turned to her with tears in his eyes. He says he's lonely. A violent bang erupted from below. The basement door shook hard enough to rattle its hinges. Another bang followed. And another. Something massive was striking the other side. Then silence returned. Elias swallowed nervously. We need to know what's down there. Margaret stared at him in disbelief. Have you lost your mind? Before Elias could answer, the grandfather clock stopped ticking. The sudden silence felt worse than the noises. Then Clara heard singing again. The little girl from the lake. Her voice drifted through the walls softly. Don't let him out. The lantern flickered violently. For a split second Clara saw figures standing all around the entrance hall. Children. Dozens of them. Their bodies bloated with water. Their eyes hollow black pits. Then the light steadied and they were gone. Margaret began praying under her breath. Elias finally stepped away from the basement hallway. We wait until morning, he said. If morning comes, Clara whispered. None of them slept. They remained together inside the library while rain battered the mansion through the night. Elias kept his revolver close. Margaret held Samuel tightly beside her. Around 3 in the morning, Clara noticed something strange about the windows. The rain outside had stopped. But water still moved across the glass. As though the house sat underwater. She slowly approached one window. Dark shapes drifted beyond the fogged glass outside. Bodies. Human bodies floating in darkness. Clara stumbled backward in horror. Then one floated close enough for her to see its face. A child. Its eyes suddenly opened. The library door slammed shut. Samuel screamed. The fireplace exploded outward in a shower of sparks and ash. A hand reached from inside the flames. Long pale fingers clawing toward them. Margaret pulled the children back as Elias fired his revolver instinctively. The gunshot echoed deafeningly through the room. The hand vanished. But the laughter started immediately afterward. Children laughing throughout the entire mansion. Running footsteps thundered overhead. Doors opening and slamming. Glass shattering upstairs. Something huge moving inside the walls. Then came a deep voice. Not heard with ears. Felt inside their minds. Bring him below. Samuel began crying uncontrollably. He won't stop talking, the boy sobbed. Margaret held his face gently. Who? The drowned father. Lightning flashed outside. For one brief moment Clara saw the outline of Holloway House reflected in the library mirror behind them. Except, the reflection was wrong. The house in the mirror looked alive. Candles burned everywhere. Figures walked through the hallways. And standing behind them in the reflection was Elias. Except his reflected face was smiling. The real Elias was not. Clara turned instantly. Nobody stood there. But when she looked back at the mirror, Elias's reflection slowly lifted one finger to its lips. Then the mirror cracked straight down the center. Elias backed away pale with terror. What in God's name is this place? A voice answered from the hallway. Home. The library doors creaked open slowly. A little boy stood outside. Clara realized instantly he wasn't alive. His neck bent sideways unnaturally. Mud covered his bare feet. He looked directly at Samuel. He wants to meet you. Samuel whimpered. Margaret grabbed the fireplace poker defensively. Stay back. The dead boy smiled. You're too late. Suddenly all the candles extinguished again. Darkness swallowed the room completely. And something enormous inhaled beneath the floorboards directly underneath them. The wood cracked. A massive bulge formed beneath the carpet. Moving. Alive. Clara screamed as black water erupted upward through the floor. Tiny pale hands burst from the flooding boards. Children's hands. Grabbing. Pulling. Elias dragged Margaret and the children toward the hallway as the library floor collapsed inward behind them. The room beneath wasn't a basement anymore. It looked endless. Dark water stretching infinitely downward. And in the center of it stood something gigantic. A silhouette made from writhing bodies. Faces twisting across its flesh. Hundreds of faces. Children. Adults. All screaming silently. The creature slowly lifted its head toward them. 2 enormous white eyes opened in the darkness. Samuel froze. It found me, he whispered. Then the thing smiled. The smile stretched impossibly wide across the creature's shifting face. Bones cracked beneath its skin as dozens of mouths opened at once. Some cried. Some laughed. Some begged for mercy. One voice rose above all the others. Elias's voice. Bring him to me. The floor around the opening splintered further. Black water poured into the hallway like blood from a wound. Margaret grabbed Samuel and pulled him backward. We're leaving now. But the house itself seemed alive. The front doors slammed shut again downstairs. Windows shattered violently one after another. Cold wind screamed through the corridors carrying the smell of rotting lake water. Clara stared into the abyss beneath the broken library floor. Children moved inside the darkness below. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. Their pale arms reached upward desperately. Help us. The little ghost girl appeared beside Clara suddenly. Eleanor. Her soaked dress clung to her thin body as she pointed toward the far end of the hallway. The furnace, she whispered. Clara blinked. What? Burn the heart. Before Clara could ask more, Eleanor vanished. A deafening roar exploded from beneath the house. The creature began rising, not climbing, flowing upward like liquid flesh. Its body pushed through the shattered floorboards slowly, carrying the faces of the dead trapped inside it. Margaret screamed. Elias stepped toward the thing instead of away from it. His eyes had gone completely black. He chose us, Elias whispered reverently. The creature extended several long human-like arms toward him. Then Clara realized the horrifying truth. It was wearing pieces of Elias's face across its body. Half-formed copies stretching and dissolving inside the flesh. Samuel began shaking violently. He's inside my head. Blood trickled from the boy's nose. Margaret pulled him close. No one is taking you. The creature's many mouths opened together. He belongs below. The force of the voice knocked everyone backward. Paintings flew from the walls. Glass exploded throughout the mansion. Somewhere upstairs, children began running through the hallways laughing wildly. Clara forced herself up. The furnace, she whispered. Margaret looked confused. What furnace? The one downstairs. Clara suddenly remembered the old coal furnace Elias discovered earlier in the basement. Massive gas pipes connected it through the lower foundations of the house. If the entire cellar ignited, it might destroy everything beneath the mansion. Another roar shook the house. The creature rose higher from the abyss, dragging endless black water with it. Dead hands gripped the edges of the broken floor around it. Elias slowly walked toward the thing like a man entering church. Father, he whispered. Margaret stared at him in horror. Then Elias turned toward his own family. And smiled. Don't be afraid, he said softly. It only hurts at first. Clara felt sick. Samuel suddenly screamed and collapsed onto the floor, convulsing violently. Dark veins spread beneath his skin. The creature was reaching him somehow. Margaret cried desperately. Help me. Clara grabbed Samuel's shoulders while Margaret tried holding his arms still. The boy's eyes rolled back white. Then he spoke in another voice entirely. Deep. Ancient. You cannot escape the water. The hallway lights exploded. Darkness swallowed everything except the pale glow coming from the abyss. And within that glow Clara saw something impossible. The trapped souls inside the creature were moving. Fighting. Children pushing against the flesh from within. Eleanor appeared among them, her black eyes locked onto Clarice. Burn it now. The mansion shook violently again. Part of the ceiling collapsed nearby. Clara made her decision. She grabbed the lantern from the floor. Mother, take Samuel. Where are you going? To the basement. Margaret stared at her like she'd gone insane. You can't go down there. But Clara was already running. The hallway behind her warped strangely as she descended the staircase toward the lower floor. The walls sweated black water. Whispering voices crawled through the darkness around her. Some begged her to stop. Others begged her to continue. At the bottom of the stairs she reached the basement door. It stood open now. Warm air breathed from the darkness below. Not normal warmth. Wet warmth. Like breath from a living throat. Clara forced herself downward. The basement looked different than before. The stone walls pulsed slowly. As though alive. Water covered the floor ankle deep, rippling around her feet despite no visible movement. Then she heard chains rattling nearby. Clara lifted the lantern. Human skeletons hung from iron hooks along the walls. Children's skeletons. Some still wore scraps of clothing. Clara covered her mouth in horror. At the center of the basement stood the furnace. Ancient. Rust-covered. Connected to thick pipes disappearing into the foundation beneath the house. And beside it, the cellar door. Wide open. Darkness beyond it moved unnaturally. Clara approached slowly despite every instinct telling her to run. The smell pouring from the opening was unbearable. Rot. Lake water. Death. Something moved below. Huge. The voice came again. Closer now. Come below. Clara peered into the darkness. Stone steps descended impossibly deep underground. Far below she saw water reflecting faint light. And standing knee-deep within it, children. Rows of silent drowned children staring upward. Behind them stood the drowned father. Fully visible now. Its true form defied reason. A towering mass of fused bodies twisting endlessly together. Faces emerged screaming from its flesh before sinking back beneath the surface. Human arms stretched from its sides like broken branches. At the center of the creature's chest Clara saw Samuel's face forming slowly beneath the skin. Still alive. Still conscious. The boy's terrified eyes met hers. Help me, Clara screamed. The creature began climbing the stairs toward her. Each movement sounded like bones grinding underwater. The walls around the basement trembled violently. Clara stumbled backward toward the furnace. Think. She noticed the coal chute beside the machine. Still full. And next to it, several barrels of lamp oil. Hope surged through her terror. Upstairs came Margaret's scream. Then silence. The drowned father climbed higher from the cellar. Its many voices whispered together. Your family is mine. Clara grabbed the nearest oil barrel and smashed it against the furnace pipes. Oil spilled everywhere across the floor. The creature paused, perhaps sensing her intention. Its faces twisted angrily. Children inside its flesh began crying louder. Clara dumped another barrel across the furnace and cellar entrance. The creature lunged suddenly. Long arms shot toward her unnaturally fast. One hand caught her ankle. Freezing pain exploded through her body. Visions flooded her mind instantly. Children drowning in darkness. Families dragged beneath black water. The Holloways performing rituals by candlelight. Samuel screaming underground. And beneath it all, something far older sleeping beneath the lake long before humans arrived. The true thing. The thing the drowned father served. Clara screamed and struck the arm repeatedly with the lantern. The flesh split open. Dozens of tiny human mouths beneath the skin shrieked in agony. The creature released her. Clara crawled desperately toward the furnace controls. Her hands shook violently as she opened the gas valve fully. The basement filled with hissing air. The drowned father realized too late. Its many eyes widened. No. Clara lit a match. For one final second she thought of Samuel. Of her mother. Of the innocent children trapped inside the thing. Then she dropped the match. The world. Fire consumed the basement instantly. The explosion tore through Holloway House like a cannon blast. Stone walls shattered. Windows erupted outward into the storm. Flames roared up the staircase behind Clara as the entire mansion shook violently. The drowned father screamed. Not with one voice. With hundreds. The sound was unbearable. Children crying. Women shrieking. Men begging for mercy. All fused together into one monstrous howl that echoed across Blackwater Lake. Clara hit the ground hard as burning debris crashed around her. The creature thrashed wildly inside the collapsing basement. Flesh split apart beneath the flames. Faces melted and emerged again screaming. But it still kept climbing. Burning black limbs clawed upward through the fire toward her. You cannot kill what sleeps below. The voice thundered through the house itself. Clara forced herself to stand despite the pain shooting through her body. The staircase behind her collapsed. Smoke swallowed the basement rapidly. She ran blindly through the lower hallway while the mansion groaned like a dying animal around her. Above her came more screams. Margaret. Mother. Clara staggered toward the main staircase just as part of the ceiling collapsed behind her in an explosion of sparks. The entrance hall had become chaos. Flames spread across the walls and curtains. Portraits burned while black liquid poured from their painted eyes. The grandfather clock rang wildly on its own. Over and over. Too many times to count. Margaret stood near the front doors trying desperately to force them open. Samuel lay unconscious nearby, but Elias stood motionless at the center of the hall. The fire did not touch him. Black water flowed beneath his feet. His skin stretched unnaturally across his face now as though something underneath was trying to emerge. He slowly turned toward Clara. You ruined everything. Then his jaw split open far wider than humanly possible. Darkness poured from inside him. Not blood. Not water. Darkness itself. The shape of a child crawled from his mouth onto the floor. Then another. And another. Drowned children dragged themselves from Elias's body while he remained standing perfectly still. Margaret screamed in horror. Clara grabbed Samuel and pulled him upright. We have to go. But the front doors still wouldn't open. Outside the storm raged harder than ever now. Lightning flashed across the windows. And through those flashes Clara saw figures standing outside the house. Children. Hundreds of them surrounding the mansion silently in the rain. Eleanor appeared among them. Unlike the others, she looked calm. Almost peaceful. She pointed upward suddenly. Clara looked toward the chandelier hanging above the entrance hall. Its heavy iron chain stretched into the burning ceiling. An idea struck her instantly. Mother. Get back. Margaret dragged Samuel away just as Clara seized a burning piece of wood from the floor. Elias began walking toward them unnaturally fast. His limbs bent wrong. Bones cracked beneath his skin. The drowned father was inside him now. Clara hurled the burning wood upward. The flames caught the chandelier rope immediately. The chain snapped. The enormous chandelier crashed downward directly onto Elias. Iron and fire smashed him into the floor. The impact shattered the wooden boards beneath him. For one horrifying second Clara saw what lay underneath. Not earth. Not foundation. An endless ocean of black water beneath the house. Something gigantic moved far below its surface. Watching. Waiting. Elias screamed as burning metal pinned him down. His body began sinking into the broken floorboards slowly, pulled downward by unseen hands beneath the water. Clara. Margaret shouted. The front doors suddenly burst open by themselves. Cold rain and wind exploded into the entrance hall. The ghost children outside all lifted their heads together. Then they began walking toward the mansion. Not attacking. Entering. Passing silently through the burning walls and shattered windows. Straight toward the abyss beneath the floor. Clara stared in disbelief as the drowned spirits moved around them without harm. Eleanor stopped beside her briefly. It's ending, she whispered softly. Then the little girl stepped into the darkness below. One by one the spirits followed her downward. As they vanished, the house began collapsing faster. The drowned father roared from somewhere beneath the foundations. The sound carried pure rage now. The trapped souls were escaping. Elias reached upward from beneath the broken floorboards desperately. His black eyes filled with terror for the first time. Help me. Clara hesitated. For one brief moment she saw her real father again beneath the horror. Then dozens of pale hands erupted from the darkness below and dragged him screaming into the abyss. The floor sealed shut behind him. Silence followed. The grandfather clock stopped. Every flame inside the mansion suddenly turned blue. And deep beneath the earth, something ancient screamed one final time. The sound shook the lake itself. Then everything collapsed. Clara grabbed Margaret and Samuel as the three of them ran into the storm moments before Holloway House imploded inward. The roof caved first. Then the walls. Fire exploded upward into the night sky as the entire estate disappeared into itself like a sinking ship. The ground trembled violently beneath them. Blackwater Lake churned beside the ruins. Huge waves crashed against the shoreline though no wind touched the water. Then the lake began swallowing itself. A massive whirlpool formed at its center. Dark shapes twisted beneath the surface. The drowned father emerged one final time. Only half its body rose now. Burning flesh hung from its collapsing form while freed spirits tore themselves from within it like escaping birds. Children's faces ripped free from the creature screaming into the night before dissolving into pale light. The monster shrieked in agony. And beneath its roar came another sound. Something deeper. Older. Awakening below the lake. The water suddenly bulged upward. An enormous shadow moved beneath the whirlpool. Far larger than the drowned father itself. Clara's blood froze. The drowned father wasn't the real evil. It was only a servant. A fragment. The true thing beneath Blackwater Lake began rising slowly from the depths. And for the first time, even the drowned father looked afraid. The lake split apart. Water surged upward in towering waves as something colossal moved beneath the whirlpool. The storm above Blackwater County seemed to bend toward it. Lightning flashed endlessly across the sky now, illuminating impossible shapes below the surface. Clara could barely breathe. Margaret clutched Samuel tightly against her chest while the ruins of Holloway House burned behind them. The drowned father shrieked again. Not in rage anymore. In terror. The gigantic shadow beneath the lake rose closer to the surface. And the world around them changed. The forest fell silent instantly. Even the storm stopped making sound. No thunder. No rain. Nothing. Only the movement beneath the water. Clara realized the thing was so enormous she could not fully comprehend its shape. Her mind struggled to understand what she was seeing. Eyes opened beneath the lake. Dozens of them, each larger than a human body. Pale white circles staring upward through the dark water. Then came the voice. Not words. Something older than language. The sound entered directly into their minds. Margaret collapsed screaming. Blood trickled from Samuel's ears. Clara dropped to her knees clutching her head as visions flooded her thoughts. Ancient forests beneath endless rain. Tribes fleeing from the lake centuries ago. Children sacrificed in caves beneath the earth. The Holloways kneeling before the drowned father. And deep below everything, a vast sleeping entity imprisoned beneath Blackwater Lake long before mankind existed. The drowned father had never been the master. Only the jailer. The sacrifices fed the prison. The souls kept the true thing asleep. And now the prison was breaking. The creature beneath the lake began rising fully. Water peeled away from its surface in gigantic waves. Clara saw fragments of its body emerging. Black stone-like flesh covered in moving symbols. Limbs larger than houses twisting beneath the storm. Its many eyes blinked independently. Every blink caused the ground to shake. Samuel suddenly opened his eyes wide. He's waking up, he whispered weakly. The thing heard him. All the enormous eyes beneath the lake turned toward the boy simultaneously. The pressure inside Clara's skull became unbearable. Then Eleanor appeared again beside the shoreline. But she no longer looked drowned. The little girl appeared peaceful now. Warm light surrounded her faintly. There's still time, she said. Clara struggled to stand. How do we stop it? Eleanor pointed toward Samuel. The last seal. Margaret stepped backward immediately. No. Eleanor looked sadly at her. The bloodline opened the gate. The bloodline must close it. Samuel slowly rose to his feet. Though exhausted, His face looked strangely calm. He chose me a long time ago, the boy whispered. Margaret grabbed him desperately. You're not going anywhere near that lake. But Samuel gently pulled away. If we don't stop it now, everyone dies. The massive entity beneath the water continued rising. The shoreline cracked apart. Trees bent toward the lake unnaturally as if pulled by invisible gravity. And somewhere beneath the storm, Clara heard millions of voices whispering together. Hungry. Samuel looked at Clara. You have to let me go. Tears streamed down Clara's face instantly. No. The boy smiled weakly. You saved me once already. He turned toward the lake. The drowned father remained partially alive near the whirlpool, writhing in agony as spirits continued escaping its ruined body. For the first time, it looked small compared to the true entity awakening beneath the water. Samuel began walking toward the shoreline slowly. Margaret collapsed crying. Clara wanted to stop him. Every part of her screamed to stop him. But deep inside she knew Eleanor spoke the truth. The Holloways had opened the gate generations ago. Now one of them had to close it. Samuel reached the edge of the black water. The enormous eyes beneath the lake watched him silently. Then the boy turned back one final time. I'm not scared anymore. And he stepped into the lake. The water swallowed him instantly. The reaction was immediate. The entire lake exploded upward in a blinding pillar of black water and pale light. The massive creature beneath the surface convulsed violently. A roar shook the heavens. Not from the drowned father. From the ancient thing itself. Symbols across its colossal body began burning bright white beneath the water. Chains. Clara suddenly saw gigantic chains wrapped around the entity deep below the lake. Ancient chains covered in symbols older than human language. Samuel's sacrifice had reawakened them. The creature thrashed violently. Mountains shook in the distance. Entire sections of forest collapsed toward the shoreline. The drowned father screamed as the chains wrapped around it too, dragging the monster downward. Thousands of freed spirits surrounded the whirlpool now. Children, families, victims from centuries of sacrifice. Their pale forms circled the lake like glowing stars. Eleanor stood among them smiling softly. Then she looked toward Clara one final time. Thank you. The spirits descended together into the water. And the chains tightened. The colossal entity beneath the lake gave one final earth-shaking roar. Then the entire whirlpool collapsed inward. Silence. The storm vanished instantly. Clouds above Blackwater County broke apart. Moonlight touched the lake for the first time in decades. The water became still. Completely still. No shadow remained beneath the surface. No eyes. No voices. Nothing. Margaret sobbed quietly beside Clara as dawn slowly approached over the ruined shoreline. Samuel was gone. The drowned father was gone. And Holloway House had become nothing more than burning rubble beside the calm black lake. By sunrise, the nightmare was over. Or so they hoped. Authorities arrived 2 days later after smoke from the fire was spotted miles away. Clara and Margaret told them the mansion collapsed during the storm. No bodies were ever recovered from the ruins. Not Elias. Not Samuel. Not anyone. Most believed grief and exhaustion had driven the surviving Holloways into hysteria. But the people of Blackwater County knew better. Old locals whispered that the curse had finally ended. For years afterward, strange occurrences around the lake ceased entirely. No more disappearances. No whispers in the woods. No ghostly lights near the shoreline. Nature slowly returned. Birds nested in the forests again. Animals drank safely from the lake. And for the first time anyone could remember, children played near Blackwater County without fear. Clara and Margaret left Oregon forever. Neither ever spoke publicly about what happened that night. Margaret died years later carrying Samuel's photograph inside her Bible until her final breath. Clara lived a long life haunted by memories she could never fully escape. Sometimes she dreamed of the lake. Sometimes she heard Samuel's voice calling softly through rainstorms. But she never returned to Blackwater County. Not even once. Decades passed. The story faded into legend. Most dismissed it as folklore. A ghost story invented by isolated townsfolk. Yet certain details remained impossible to explain. Divers searching Blackwater Lake in 1968 discovered enormous chains deep beneath the water. Far too massive for any human construction. The chains vanished when investigators returned with equipment days later. In 1989 a forest fire swept near the old Holloway ruins. Witnesses claimed they saw children standing unharmed inside the flames watching silently from the shoreline. And every few years, usually during violent storms, travelers passing through Blackwater County still report seeing a boy standing near the lake. Barefoot, pale, watching the water. In the autumn of 1937, Nearly 40 years after the destruction of Holloway House, a priest named Father Beaumont arrived in Blackwater County carrying a leather suitcase filled with handwritten notes and religious relics. He came because of a letter. The letter contained no signature, no return address, only one sentence written in faded black ink. The lake is waking again. Father Beaumont had spent years investigating reports of possessions, disappearances, and occult rituals across the Pacific Northwest. Most cases proved to be fraud or madness. But Blackwater County disturbed him immediately. The town felt wrong. Too quiet, too watchful. People avoided speaking after sunset. Children were called indoors before dark. And every resident he questioned refused to discuss the lake for long. One old woman finally whispered the Holloway name before making the sign of the cross repeatedly. Father Beaumont rented a small room above the general store and spent several nights studying county records. Dozens of pages were missing from official archives. Entire families had vanished throughout the 19th century. Most disappearances occurred during storms. Always near Blackwater Lake. And always involving children. On the fourth night, Father Beaumont heard knocking beneath his bedroom floor. 3 slow knocks. He froze. Then came scratching. Tiny fingernails dragging across wood. The priest lit a lantern immediately and whispered a prayer. The scratching stopped. But moments later he heard a child laughing outside his door. When he opened it, the hallway stood empty except for muddy footprints leading toward the staircase. Small barefoot footprints. Father Beaumont followed them downstairs cautiously. The prints ended at the back entrance facing the distant forest. And there, far beyond the trees, he saw it. A light, moving beside the lake. The priest returned to his room and packed immediately. At dawn he hired a local guide named Warren Pike to escort him into the hills surrounding Blackwater Lake. Warren refused at first. People disappear up there, he muttered. Father Beaumont offered extra money. Warren finally agreed on one condition. We leave before nightfall. The journey through the forest took several hours. Rain clouds gathered overhead by afternoon. As they climbed the ridge overlooking the lake, Warren suddenly stopped walking. Father Beaumont followed his horrified gaze. The ruins of Holloway House still stood beside the water. Except they weren't ruins anymore. Part of the mansion had rebuilt itself. Fresh wooden walls connected to blackened remains from decades earlier. Smoke drifted from one chimney despite the abandoned property. Warren turned pale instantly. That wasn't their last winter. Father Beaumont felt cold dread settle into his stomach. As they approached cautiously, he noticed children's footprints covering the muddy path leading toward the estate. Tiny footprints. Hundreds of them. The front doors of the manor stood partially open. The priest raised his crucifix and stepped inside. Dust floated through dim light spilling across the entrance hall. The grandfather clock still stood against the wall. Ticking. Tick. 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 Warren whispered shakily, "We should leave." Then they heard music upstairs. Soft piano music drifting through the house. Father Beaumont slowly climbed the staircase. The melody stopped instantly. Silence swallowed the mansion. Then a child's voice whispered nearby. "He remembers God." Warren bolted for the front doors immediately. Father Beaumont heard him screaming outside moments later. The priest rushed downstairs and burst from the manor. Warren stood frozen near the shoreline staring into the water. His face had gone completely white. "What is it?" Warren pointed silently toward the lake. Something moved beneath the surface. Massive shapes circling slowly far below. "Father." Beaumont grabbed Warren's shoulder. "We're leaving." But Warren didn't respond. His lips trembled. "He's down there." The water near the shore suddenly rippled. Then a pale hand emerged slowly from beneath the surface. A child's hand. It gripped Warren's ankle. Before Father Beaumont could react, dozens more hands burst from the lake. Children's hands. They dragged Warren screaming into the black water within seconds. The lake became calm again immediately afterward. Father Beaumont stumbled backward horrified. Then he heard footsteps behind him. He turned slowly. Samuel Holloway stood near the manor ruins. Unchanged. Still a boy. Rain fell softly around him though the storm had not yet begun. Father Beaumont stared in disbelief. "Who are you?" Samuel looked toward the lake sadly. "The lock." The priest gripped his crucifix tighter. "What is beneath that water?" Samuel's expression darkened. "You don't want to know." Thunder rolled across the mountains. The surface of the lake began trembling violently. Samuel looked frightened suddenly. "He hears prayers." Father Beaumont stepped backward. "What?" Samuel slowly turned toward him. "He hates God most of all." The storm exploded overhead instantly. Rain hammered the forest. And deep beneath Blackwater Lake, something enormous opened its eyes once more.